I'm Kiyan.
This is Trust Your Doctor, that podcast where we kill our enemies with rock salt. Because this week we watched The Image of the Fendahl,
Written by Chris Boucher.
directed by George Spenton Foster.
And aired in October and November of 1977. So Chris Boucher's final serial.
Mostly. I mean, except for the fact that he couldn't finish the rewrites, so incoming script editor Anthony Reid took over.
And I guess it shows, since this is probably the weakest Boucher serial of the three.
Yeah. It's more info dumpy.
Which I read is in line with Reed's signature style.
Great. Guess we have that to look forward to in the coming weeks.
Come back, Chris Boucher.
Robert Holmes, don't go. Stay. Right. So I guess we'll just talk about the serial. I have some things to say about the directing too for once, but we'll mention those later on.
Really?
Yeah, It was just kind of noticeable that it was different from all the other weeks. But it begins with, like, straight 10 minutes of the Doctor not showing up.
Right, kind of like season intros, but this isn't a season intro.
It's kind of just becoming a thing that the Doctor doesn't show up till, like, 5-10 minutes into the first episode.
Well, sometimes it's good if the serial-specific characters are actually enjoyable to watch and actually setting up a good story.
Like they're sort of doing here.
Yeah, this was... Maybe we just went into it with our expectations too high, but anyway, a couple scientists are studying a skull.
Yeah, Fendelman, Stahl,
Fendelman.
Thea, and Colton, I think it was.
Colby.
Something with a Col.
Adam. I mean, I just called Adam and Max because they only referred to them as
Really?
Adam and Max.
Fendelman called Max Stahl the whole serial.
Well, everyone else called him Max, and I guess I only picked up on that.
Yeah, well, I only paid attention to Fendelman, so...
He did have that accent that I wasn't sure whether or not was real.
I mean, it was also, like, the most inflammatory of the characters.
Well, I mean, I don't know. In regards to his accent, one, what accent was that? And two,
German?
Was it even a real accent, or was he just putting it on?
I don't know.
I don't know, and I guess I could have looked that up. I mean... But I didn't.
But you didn't, so we're just gonna have to guess. So they're talking about the skull, and Fendelman, Stahl, and Adam leave the room. And Thea is left with the skull, and then there's this weird, trippy flash back and forth between the skull and Thea, where it looks like the skull's been superimposed on Thea's face. So, kind of like you can see her skull underneath her face.
Yeah, almost, I guess. Anyway, something weird is going on between Thea and the skull. And they also mentioned that the skull was unearthed 12 million years ago, which is before humans showed up on the scene.
Yeah, it was buried 12 million years ago, and they unearthed it like last week.
Oh, yeah, yeah, they unearthed it 12 million years ago.
Time travel, how does it work? Yeah, so they've got the skull, and you see a hiker, and he kind of just goes, ah!
Out on the grounds. They're at some sort of, I think they call it a priory, which is some sort of live-in monastery, which I guess all monasteries are live-in, but, yeah. I guess they've commandeered it for their scientific purposes.
Well, I guess the skull was found nearby, so it's like, we're taking this over now. Thanks, guys.
Some people live there, right? And
Yeah,
they
Mrs.
continue.
Tyler.
They continue to live there.
Oh, the crazy Mrs. Tyler.
Hey, she was actually the most sane one out of all of them.
No, I think that would be Max. No, Colby.
Max.
Adam.
Max is the one who goes insane.
I'm trying to talk about the one who actually escaped everything. I think that was Colby.
Yeah, it was. He also wasn't... Okay, whatever.
Okay, well, it cuts to the Doctor and Leela in the TARDIS room, and Leela has a new outfit, and the Doctor has a new scarf. So we should just mention those.
Yeah, and I mean, Leela showed up, and my first thought was, wow, why does she look so different? I mean, she has a new outfit. Her hair is up. But I was like, no, it can't be just that. It has to be something else. It couldn't just be those two things. And then when she put her hair down at the end, I was like, oh, it was those things.
Yeah, she just had her hair up, which actually was really confusing and kind of disorienting for a while.
It wasn't confusing. It just looked very different than how she normally looks.
The Doctor's scarf is the same design. It's just bolder colors. More brash.
For a bold new era. No.
A bold new era in bad costuming.
Hey, we're almost at the Fourth Doctor's next costume, I guess. Well, in a couple more seasons.
That costume. That's the epitome of bad costuming. This is actually pretty good. Also, K9 is...
Oh, God.
K9 is on the floor of the TARDIS, half disassembled. The Doctor's like, well, I don't know what's wrong with him yet. Still trying to fix him, so...
So that's how they write out K9 for this serial.
Look, in all fairness, Chris Boucher didn't know he was going to need to use K9 in this serial, because Hinchcliffe made the decision, or not Hinchcliffe, Williams made the decision to keep K9 pretty late into the development of the Invisible Enemy. So...
Yeah, I don't care. They should have shoehorned him in anyway, poorly.
Well, I mean, Robert Holmes writes next week's serial, and apparently, since he knew K9 was going to be there, he uses K9. Hopefully. Yeah, K9's on the floor with circuitry everywhere, and the Doctor calls him an it, and Leela's like, don't call it an it, it's a he. And the
Are you sure,
like, what?
Leela? Are you sure it's not a she?
And Leela's like, you call the TARDIS she all the time. The Doctor's like, no, I don't. And then they get trapped in a time vortex thing, and they escape, and the Doctor's like, ah, she did it. Good job, old girl. Leela's like,
So they wander outside, and they're in the woods outside the Priory, and the Doctor decides to go to sleep under a tree.
Yeah.
And wakes up with Leela holding some dude at knife point.
Yeah, Adam Moss. Something Moss.
No, Adam was the other guy. Ted Moss.
The names in this serial. Half of them were last names and half of them were first names.
Well, half of them were last names that sounded like first names.
Yeah. So, anyway, she's got Ted Moss at knife point, and he's like, there's weird things going on in the Priory. The Doctor's like, Leela, take your knife away from his neck. Also, would you like a jelly baby? And Moss is like, sure.
Well, he takes it reluctantly, and then they have this whole discussion about the weird things happening on the premises. And then as the Doctor and Leela walk away, he sort of just skeptically eats the jelly baby. It's pretty funny.
Right, so the Doctor also mentions when they forcibly land, I guess, that they landed because of some sort of sonic disruptor beam thing from the Priory that needs to be shut off, because if it gets to 100 hours, then it will just blow a hole in space-time and probably destroy the entire planet.
Right, and Fendelman also makes mention to Thea and the rest of them about how he used the sonic discrepancy or whatever it was to help him do experiments on the skull or something. And
I mean, Fendelman's just insane from the start, so...
Right. I thought it was... Maybe I'm wrong on this. I thought it was that he could have used the... What is it called? The sonic something or the other?
the sonic disruptor.
Sonic screwdriver, no.
The sonic beam thing. Time scanner. Sonic time scanner.
Apparently,
whatever.
Apparently he had 100 hours to use it, and he already used like 99 of them.
98.
98, whatever.
Yeah, so we cut back to the team of scientists, and one of them, I think Adam, found the body of the hiker and was like, yo, we got a body. I'm going to call the police. And Fendelman was like, no, you mustn't call the police. What if they find out? What if they find out about the skull?
I think he was afraid of them shutting down the research. So he decides that it's best to move the body and cover everything up.
It has Max, I think, perform an autopsy, right? Unless I got those two mixed up backwards.
No, you got them correct.
Oh, okay.
And then I guess they hire some personal armed guards.
Yeah, Fendelman hires guards to guard the compound's Priory. And also no one's allowed in or out without identification, which comes into play when Mrs. Tyler shows up immediately right after to go spout off some craziness about devils or something.
Right, she's the old woman who lives in the little house on the prairie. No.
The little house on the Priory.
Yeah. And she's pretty mad that they've commandeered her, well, not commandeered, but she's mad that they've blockaded her house.
Yeah. So she comes to complain to Fendahl, and Fendal's like, just get this lady out of here. And this is where I noticed that directing was clearly different from previous serials, because we get all these hyper zooms on Mrs. Tyler's face. And actually follows her around, because I don't know who was the actress for Mrs. Tyler, but she did this weird thing where she kind of wobbled around when she talked. And the camera even followed her face around. This was really interesting, actually.
Huh. Did not notice that, to be honest.
And I only noticed it on Mrs. Tyler for a while, and then in episode 4, I guess the director was like, let's just do it to everyone. So there was just super zooms on everyone's face in episode 4 when they were talking. I was like, this is really weird. I don't need to be this close to Tom Baker's face. But I guess he's making his mark, so...
Yeah, this is where he makes his mark, on the zooms in this serial.
This is where you get your big break.
Anyway, there's a little subplot here, I guess, about one of the guards being super disrespectful to Mrs. Tyler.
I mean, it doesn't come into play again because Mrs. Tyler just goes MIA for an episode.
I think she mentions that bad things are about to happen or something along those lines.
Wow, specific.
No, she says you guys are going to be in for it if you continue this research or something like that.
She's not wrong.
Something cryptic, and yeah, she isn't wrong. Because things are about to go south fast.
Yeah, immediately after she leaves, I think Thea goes to investigate the skull some more, and the weird Ghost Rider effect activates again and starts attacking the doctor, and I was like, ah!
Well, episode 1 actually ends with the doctor being assaulted by an invisible enemy.
Yeah, he split up from Leela, but I can't actually remember why. I think he sends Leela into the town to investigate while he runs around somewhere else.
Right, and I think he sort of is paralyzed or frozen or whatever.
Yeah.
And is attacked by some unseen force, which he gets away from in 2.
Yeah. Also as part of the cliffhanger, we had this weird double cliffhanger. Leela's about to be shot by Ted Moss with a shotgun at Mrs. Tyler's house. Yeah,
knowing Leela, things are going to go terribly for Moss. Which they do. I mean, into episode 2, he kind of tries to antagonize her, and she just
grabs
owns
the
him.
gun and threatens him. And then, what was his name? It was Mrs. Tyler's grandson walks in.
Right.
It's like, what is going on here? And he's got a cane in Leela's back. He's like, put the gun down. Well, blow your back out or whatever. His name was Jack Tyler.
Yeah.
He's like, put the gun down. And she's like, okay. And then he reveals that he's just got a cane. And Leela's like, oh, man.
Yeah, didn't one of the doctors did that, I believe?
Yeah.
I think the first doctor, but I can't remember where.
Really? I would think it would be the third.
Maybe it was the third. I don't remember, but Jack Tyler and Moss aren't exactly on friendly terms either, so he kind of kicks Moss out.
Yeah, I guess Moss is just a squatter, just coming into their house looking for somewhere to sleep. I don't think it's really made clear what Moss's relation to the Tylers is. So Mrs. Tyler shows up.
Right, and she spouts some more superstitious nonsense, which actually turns out to be non-nonsense.
Yeah, she tells Jack to load his shotgun with... Well, she wants some shells to load with rock salt, and Jack's like, okay, here you go. And she also gives him some sort of talisman that doesn't come into play.
Right, she gives Jack and Leela the little charms, which, come to think of it, even if she hadn't given them the charms, it still would have played out exactly the same because she would have had the charms on her, and she was there. Well, I guess not. I guess she wouldn't have necessarily had the charms on her, but whatever.
Yeah, well, she gives it to them, and they're like, okay, if it makes you feel any better, crazy old Mrs. Tyler. She also fills some shotgun shells with rock salt, like we said, which also comes into play later. Also makes it impossible for Jack Tyler to kill anyone right now because his gun's loaded with rock salt.
Well, she mentions that she mentions salt is the best deterrent against supernatural forces, which, hey, Guess it's true.
The Doctor should just carry salt with him on all of his adventures from now on.
And
Daleks,
garlic.
salt. Cybermen, salt.
It could confuse his enemies for long enough to kill them. I don't know.
Pocket salt.
I guess he should carry around garlic and a cross as well.
And a wooden stake while we're at it.
Yeah.
Silver bullets. Just go all out, vampire hunter. Well, anyway.
Things are taking a turn for the terrible in the mansion. As Thea is pretty much going crazy. And then Max comes in with a gun. And, he doesn't have a gun yet, actually.
First, Stahl and Adam kind of complain about the guards. Like, what is this? Why are there guards, Fendelman? And Fendelman's like, I just want to be certain that no one's going to interrupt us. And they're like, okay, whatever.
At this point, I kind of thought, okay, I'll explain this later, actually.
We didn't mention the autopsy that Max performed on the body, where he reveals that it's rapidly decaying and is already almost bones. And it's weird because it shouldn't be decaying that quickly. And
right.
Now it doesn't matter if they call the police because there won't be a body for them to come and collect.
Did they bring that up later? I guess they probably did in the Doctor's little 2-minute explanation in episode 4.
Even that 2-minute info dump?
Yes.
Well,
they also explain the pentagram on the skull, which Fendelman believes to be some sort of neural energy circuit, but he doesn't know what it's for.
Well, Fendelman's theories are just all over the place, because he also reveals that he thinks humans were descended from aliens, and that the skull is of the original aliens that humans descended from.
Right, well, he
he was only like 50% wrong, based on what the Doctor says, but...
He comes to another conclusion later, which I guess it can be assumed to be the same conclusion that the Doctor explains, but we don't know, actually, what conclusion he comes to. Anyway, Max, we find out, is insane and part of a larger plot, because he sort of knocks Thea out.
Captures her.
As she's supposedly going to be used for some sort of different purpose.
Yeah, it takes her, and then he kind of reveals that he needs 13 members for his little cult thing that's going on.
Right. Almost Planet of the Spiders-esque.
Or the Daemons.
Yeah, I guess.
Where they're just going to summon Deimos. But at least that one had the monster to explain why they're all just going insane. This one's just Max being like, yeah, I'm just going to start a cult now. Anyway, Mrs. Tyler runs into the little cottage where she's staying and is kind of speechless and afraid because the invisible enemy had attacked her earlier and she had escaped.
Right, and she mentions that she didn't know exactly what it looked like, but she could have sworn it was a woman.
Yeah, and Leela slaps, just like, wake up, old woman!
Leela was awesome in this series.
No response. It's like, what? So, meanwhile, the Doctor finally makes it to the Priory and is like, this must be where the sonic time rift is coming from. That unexplained plot device.
No, it was explained.
Vaguely.
Barely.
Barely. Considering how everything else was explained in the serial, they could have explained the sonic thing. But he goes in and he sees the skull, and then I guess the skull starts calling to him because he's like, no. And then he touches the skull and he's like, ah!
Starts getting electrocuted.
And episode 2 ends on that note.
Where do we see the Fendahl on?
3, I think.
3? Okay.
Yeah. 3 is when the cult is revealed and Max comes in with the gun to shut down the experiment.
Yeah.
So the Doctor's got his hand on the skull and he's kind of like having a moment.
He actually, we didn't mention, but before he places his hand on the skull, he offers it a jelly baby.
Yeah, like that'll work. So Leela is like, well, I better go find the Doctor. So she goes looking around the Priory and comes inside and hears the Doctor screaming in agony. And she runs down the corridors and she's about to touch the Doctor. He's like, no. So she just kicks the chair out from underneath him.
Leela was awesome in this serial, like I said.
And they both say, are you okay? At the same time.
Jinx, no.
Jinx, you owe me a soda, Doctor. Soda from the year 2073. I don't know why I chose that year.
Leela does seem to be getting more familiar with modern, quote-unquote, stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I think they go and see Thea knocked out or something.
Leela mentions that Mrs. Tyler saw the monster, and the doctor's like, where is she? Take me to her.
When did they come across Thea then?
After talking with Mrs. Tyler about the monster.
Okay.
I go to Mrs. Tyler, and then she's not waking up, and the doctor's like, come on, we're guests. You should make us some tea, or maybe some... and Leela's like, fruitcake, and Leela's doctor's like, oh, I love fruitcake.
They go on and on about fruitcake.
Yeah, they go make some fruitcake.
And then they eat it, and they're like, wow, this isn't really the best fruitcake, or something like that.
No, Mrs. Tyler says that. She's like, if you're gonna make fruitcake, you should make it right. And the doctor's like, you're awake, Mrs. Tyler. We can begin.
So they eat some tea and fruitcake. They drink some tea and eat some fruitcake.
They eat some tea and drink some fruitcake, yeah.
Whoops.
So they talk about the monster, and Mrs. Tyler's like, yeah, it came from me, it was a woman, it was kind of white, kind of big.
That's all you need to know, no.
And that's all you need to know, and the dog's like, cool, thanks, let's go investigate the Priory.
Meanwhile, Max has pulled a gun on Adam and Fendelman.
Yep. And he threatens to kill them, and they're like, what are you doing, Max? Max? And he's like, turn off the scanner. Fendelman, turn off the scanner. And Fendelman's like, what nonsense. And he turns it on, I was like, oh, okay. And then they make a show of him picking up this gun off of an instrument panel, I guess, but Fendelman never ends up using it.
Fendelman picked up the gun, or Max did?
Well, Max came in with the gun, and then Adam's like, hey, Fendelman, you should turn around. And then he turns around, and then there's a scene of someone picking up a gun off of
Yeah, that was Max.
I thought it was implied to be Fendelman because Max came in with the gun.
I thought Max
was already holding the gun at the beginning of the scene.
Put down his gun and then picked it up because it was on that little instrument right next to the door where he walked in and he hadn't moved.
I thought it was Fendelman who picked up a gun and then just never used it. I was like, what?
If he had a gun, he probably wouldn't have gone along with Max.
Then why would Max put down his gun and pick up his gun again?
I don't know, but that was the only way I could explain it to myself.
What is going on?
Well, maybe it's another instance of the directing you mentioned. Who was this directed by? Spenton something or the other?
Spenton something?
Someone...
George Spenton Foster.
Hasn't he directed something else previously?
No, actually, I checked.
No?
He directs one more thing. He directs this and then an upcoming serial, the Ribos Operation. Or the Ribos Operation, not sure the pronunciation there.
Pretty sure that's a season opener?
Next season, I think so.
Yeah. Anyway, Max somehow gets Adam and Fendelman to go along with him, even though Fendelman might have a gun. We're not sure about that.
Well, even if he doesn't, Fendelman is just a little bit off his rocker. Do you really want him as part of your cult thing?
Sure, why not? Off your rocker people make the best cult members, so... I guess you'd have to be a little off your rocker to even join a cult, so...
I mean, what if you didn't know it was a cult?
Well, that's another story for another serial, maybe. Anyway, Max brings them down into the catacomb-like basement of the mansion. That was one of my points, not points of contention, but just points of question with this serial is, why did the basement, look like some sort of evil temple summit?
It felt like they were reusing the set from Mask of Mandragora, to be honest.
Yeah, now that you mention it.
It just happened to be the only basement set they had. Like, well, I guess we're gonna have a catacomb basement.
Yeah, there are stone pillars in the basement. Why?
Maybe the monks just on their off time, like, let's just go build some catacombs.
I mean, the more likely explanation would be that the mansion was built on top of some sort of castle or fortress or just grounds.
We're not here to make legitimate explanations. No, yeah, that actually makes more sense than anything else. So...
And then, I guess now is when they go see Thea.
Yeah, they see Thea and then they're like, let's go use the TARDIS to follow the time fish.
Well, they see the little green death slugs on Thea and the Doctor's like, oh, it's the Fendahl.
Yeah, because he thinks the Fendahl were just Gallifreyan legend. He's like, So they're like, let's go to the TARDIS and follow the time fisher. Just follow him to the Fendahl's home planet and stop this thing from ever happening. I think That was their plan? It actually wasn't explained at all what they were doing in the TARDIS except following the time fissure.
No, it really wasn't. And honestly, once the Fendahl showed up, or once they were named, I was like, wow, is Fendelman's name just a complete red herring? But no,
it's not.
That's not the case. It's actually part of another unexplained plot point.
Well, the Doctor and Leela go to the TARDIS for a good 5-10 minutes, and they just kind of talk about how the Time Lords put a seal on the Fendahl's history or something.
They basically they put the Fendahl were a threat to like every living thing in the universe. So the Time Lords trapped their planet in a time loop.
No, they blew up the planet and trapped the information in a time loop, and somehow the skull got thrust away by the explosion and landed on Earth. Not unlike Hand of Fear, I suppose.
Right, but way worse than Hand of Fear. Anyway, the Fendahl feed on the living energy of other beings, and Leela says, well, every living thing feeds on the energy of other beings, and the Doctor's like, well, this is different. This is evil.
Well, I think he says it drains the life force, whereas what Leela was talking about was they eat each other.
Yeah, still don't see the difference.
Well, the Doctor kind of figures it out. It's like, oh, shoot, it's bringing the Fendahl back. Don't know why I didn't see that earlier. Don't know why I didn't come up with it earlier. And Leela's like, well, even you can't think of everything, Doctor. And the Doctor's like, I can't? Leela's like, no. And the Doctor's like, well, I should have. Some sort of humorous exchange, and then they leave the TARDIS and K9 behind again.
Quote-unquote humorous, but...
It was humorous to me.
This serial did actually have some good moments of humor. But meanwhile, back in the basement, Max has ambiguously said some things that lead Fendelman to the conclusion that his entire family line has been used by the Fendahl. He's like, wait, Fendahl? Fendelman? It all makes sense.
And then Max is like, well, guess you're useless now, and just shoots Fendelman.
Right, but not before... not before Fendelman yells, mankind has been used! See, this was the conclusion he came to that I was talking about before, that we don't really know what conclusion it was because he dies immediately. Did he come to the right conclusion that the Doctor explains later? We'll never know. What if he was completely wrong in his assumption?
It doesn't matter because he's dead. He gets shot off screen. This serial actually has some of the more dark, I suppose, killings in the show so far. Because Stahl/Max, depending on what you want to call him, kind of just kills these people in cold blood. We'll also mention what happens to him in a bit.
But anyway, did you understand the whole subplot with Fendelman and his ancestry? Because I didn't.
Well, yes. Well, because the Doctor says later on that the Fendahl may have introduced some more hostile genes into certain humans to generate more life force to feed off of, and he says people like Fendelman would have been perfect for the Fendahl to feed off of.
Okay. Still really poorly explained there in episode 4. Anyway.
We're still in episode 3 anyway, so...
Right. They're performing the ritual. Thea is now down in the basement, and she's been thrown onto a pentagram-looking thing.
I mean, it is a pentagram.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. It is a pentagram. It's drawn on the floor. Yeah. And some bad things are happening.
Isn't that every Doctor Who serial? Some bad things are happening.
Hey, not...
Right as the Doctor shows up.
Not in, well, I guess bad things happen in Feast of Stephen. Just not to the scale that they usually do.
Well, the Doctor and Leela show back up at the Priory, meet up with Mrs. Tyler and Jack Tyler, and run into a Fendaline, and like, oh shoot, and episode 3 ends with the Fendaline bearing down on them because they can't move their legs, except the Doctor can.
Right, the Fendaline is the sort of combined form of the Fendahl, so instead of being little slugs, they're a giant, grotesque slug.
Yeah, and apparently the Doctor says later that they need 13 pieces to become an actual Fendahl. It would be 12 slugs plus in the core, which would be Thea.
Oh, is that what it was? I thought the Fendahl were the little ones and the Fendaline were the big ones.
Fendaline are the big ones, and then they get bigger when they combine. And that's why the Doctor had to kill them all. And that's why the Fendahl couldn't combine, because into episode 4 they kill that Fendaline with the rock salt shotgun.
Yeah. Turns out rock salt is the best weapon against the supernatural, or at least in this case, because they use it to kill the Fendahl Lean.
Yeah, so they do that. The doctor's like, let's go check the basement. So they run down. Well, the doctor goes to the basement, and he finds Stahl. Because Adam escapes. I don't remember how.
Well, they let him go. He and Leela actually go down to the basement, and Leela escapes with Adam, and the doctor stays there.
Oh, yeah. Leela helps him escape, and the doctor stays, and then Stahl is like, can't move my legs. I'm trapped, and the doctor's like, it's too late. You're going to be trapped here forever. And Stahl's like, hand me that gun. And the doctor's like, you can't kill Thea now. And he's like, it's not for Thea. The doctor hands him his gun, and then leaves, and then you hear a gunshot. And it's implied that Stahl killed himself. The first suicide on the show, I think, besides, I guess, Katerina injecting herself out of an airlock. Not that really counts, because she didn't know what was going on.
Yeah, I'd say this is the first suicide on the show. I mean, I can't think of any other suicides where maybe the person didn't sacrifice themselves for someone else.
Yeah, it's just Stahl realizing that life is hopeless if he's just trapped in the basement of the catacombs with unmovable legs. So he kills himself.
Pretty dark. He did sort of back himself into his own corner, though.
He did kind of set into motion everything that's about to happen.
Right. We also didn't mention that Thea has transformed into some golden
god thing. Looks like Medusa almost.
Yeah, actually. It actually looks very creepy because the way they did it is that whoever played Thea closed her eyes and they painted, I guess, Egyptian-looking eyes onto her eyelids. Looked very creepy.
Pro makeup department skills. See, kids, want to go into makeup, that's what you're going to do. Anyway, the doctor and co make it upstairs, and they're loading more rock salt into the shotgun and making, I guess, rock salt grenades.
But they run out, and the doctor's like, oh no, we need more rock salt. And Mrs. Tyler's like, do you, Jack, and Leela still have those charms I gave you? And they're like, yeah, and they hand them over, and she's like, here, rock salt. Bravo, Mrs. Tyler. Bravo. Oh, did you notice in one of the shooting scenes, I think this is actually about to come up, but maybe it already happened, that, or no, it wasn't one of, actually this is about to happen, but Leela and the doctor are chucking pieces of rock salt, and Leela, or Louise Jameson sort of is on mark, and Tom Baker just completely misses.
That scarf is getting in the way. Yeah, I did, actually. And then Leela chucks one, like, kind of near to the camera. I'm just imagining the cameraman going, oh, so yeah, that doesn't happen just yet.
No, it doesn't.
Because the doctor sets Adam up with the sonic control and is like, okay, here's what we're going to do. I need you to run it for exactly 2 minutes to confuse the Fendahl while Leela and I go into the basement, chuck some rock salt, and set these bombs to blow up. And then what I need you to do is turn it off after 2 minutes, and I've set it to explode in 3 minutes. 3 minutes after you turn it off, okay? I mean, when you turn it off, you have 3 minutes to escape. Adam's like, I got it, I think. The doctor's like, good, go, goodbye.
So, yeah, they go and do that. Leela kills another Fendahl Lean.
Yeah. There was actually, we forgot to mention the scene in episode 3, I think it was, where it's super tense and they get away from the skull. The doctor's like, yeah, if he runs it for 100 hours, everything will blow up. And Leela's like, what if he's already used his 100 hours? And the doctor's like, that's a chance I'm going to have to take.
Yeah, and that's when we find out he's used like 98 hours.
Don't know how Fendelman knows he only has 100 hours, because he never explains why he can only use it for 100 hours.
Wasn't he just keeping track of how long he used it instead of...
No, I think he said, like, the equipment has limited life or something, and you can only use them for 100 hours. But I don't know how he figured that out, or why.
Well, whatever. Doesn't the info dump occur, like, now?
Yeah, this is when the doctor talks about how the Fendaline combine to become the Fendahl, and they need 13 pieces, one of whom is Thea. And
how they've pretty much followed, well, not followed, but how they were rejected to Earth and sort of guided Fendelman's ancestors, I guess, something like that. It's
implied they guided the entire human race, kind of like the Daemons again.
Except way, way more poorly explained.
Yeah, come to think of it, this serial is just the Daemons compressed into 4 episodes poorly.
Without the Master. I guess that is part of the poor aspect, and I guess a poor man's demons.
Poor man's demon. So
instead of demons, it's slug things.
It's the Fendahl, one of the most powerful creatures in the galaxy.
It's the Green Death.
But apparently because the Doctor and Leela have killed off one of the Fendahl, plus then I think one of the ones was also Stahl was going to be one of the Fendahl, but hadn't been converted yet.
And Fendelman, right?
One of them, because he says that two pieces are now missing, so they've only got 11 of the 13 they need. Right. So they're going to be delayed for a while, looking for 2 more people to convert. So, yeah, they kill another one, which means they're down to 10 pieces.
Leela does.
Yeah, Leela kills it because the Doctor can't aim for scratch.
Well, and also Jack is sort of paralyzed when he looks at Thea. I guess another Medusa like quality is that when you look at her eyes, you get paralyzed.
Yeah, Leela's like, don't look at her eyes! And then does she just carry Jack away? For some reason I remember just picking up Jack and carrying him away. I
don't remember, to be honest. But I guess she does have pretty good aim to be able to shoot squinted or with her eyes completely closed. I don't remember what she did exactly.
Yeah, and earlier Leela had said, oh yeah, good aim is not a matter of luck to the Doctor, because like, I was just lucky. And then Leela's like, I couldn't see, I was lucky. And the Doctor's like, good aim is never a matter of luck.
Yep.
Yeah, so
nice little quip there.
They go into the basement, chuck some rock salt, set the charges, and then escape with the skull, I might add. They're like, better take the skull, it might happen again. And everyone escapes, and by everyone I mean the people who survived the serial, so Mrs. Tyler, Jack Tyler, Adam, the Doctor, and Leela.
Yep. Everyone else, well, the Fendahl and Thea.
Ted Moss is just MIA, so...
But all the other characters, including the Fendahl, burn up in a fiery explosion.
Yeah, and then the Doctor takes the skull, which he had said earlier was pretty much indestructible, and he's like, well, we'll just drop it in the star that's going supernova. That'll contain it.
Right, because we, I think, didn't mention that the skull also acts as a beacon, which is how the other Fendahl got there.
Yeah.
And that they used the sonic rift to escape the time loop or something like that.
I don't know. And then he's like, well, I better fix him, in reference to K9. And Leela's like, ha! You called him him. Doc's like, well, I can't I? He's my dog anyway. And K9 just starts nodding his head, and then the serial ends.
Oh, was he nodding his head? I thought he was, like, dozing off, you know, where you sort of drop your head and you're like, whoa. And it happens again, and you're like, whoa.
I don't think he would do that for, like, 2 minutes straight, though.
Hey, you never know.
He was just nodding, because maybe the Doctor accidentally broke his vocal circuits.
Maybe.
So that's the end of Image of Fendahl. K9 doesn't have feelings.
How do you know?
We established this last week.
How do you know we were right? Maybe
I don't, but I'm just going off what we established, so...
Yeah. Too bad K9 couldn't have been more a part of this serial.
Just wait for next week. Plus, I think he's here for like 3 seasons anyway, so...
Well, that's good.
Something like that.
Considering I spoiled when Leela goes out.
Great.
But speaking of Leela, I actually liked Leela in this serial a lot.
That new outfit, though, it's a lot more revealing than the old one.
Yeah, that is true. But apparently she goes back to the old one at the end of this serial.
Yeah, you see it. She changes into the old one. And I was like, right. I like your new outfit. And she's like, this is the old one. And he's like, yeah, I know.
And at the end also is when she lets her hair loose or whatever.
Back down.
Yeah, and apparently I read that she accidentally, or I guess this is a rumor, but she accidentally, or someone on the crew accidentally had her cut her hair 5 inches, and she's like, oh shoot, so she had to put it up. And then apparently the final scene was filmed 5 weeks after the rest of it for some reason, which, I don't know, that was the part that called into question the credibility of this. I read this on the wiki, by the way. And apparently it had grown back, so she went back to her previous look.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter.
I don't know why they do that, actually. Could have just left it up and then had it down in the next serial and no one would have cared, to be honest.
Yeah.
They could shove all this expanded universe, whatever, in between the serials.
Either way, I don't know, I felt Leela did a lot in this serial and was an active member of the plot like she usually is and should be, like most companions should be.
Yeah, well, Chris Boucher introduced Leela, so you would expect he would know what Leela should do.
Right. But there was one, I guess maybe this was due to Reed, and I'm not really even sure, but some writers have Leela refer to herself in the third person at some points, and she does once in this serial and then never again in this serial, so...
Might have just been a slip through editing.
Maybe.
It happens. I didn't actually notice that, so I couldn't comment. But yeah, Leela was pretty good this serial, better than K9.
Of course.
Which we just keep ratting on, but like I said, I'm gonna cut him some slack because Chris Boucher didn't even know that K9 was gonna be in the serial, and he didn't finish writing it because Blake 7 took over, so...
Yeah.
You know, if he's script editor for Blake 7, that kind of comes first before writing serials for Doctor Who, so...
Well, either way, due to everything we just mentioned and what we mentioned in the beginning of the episode, this was probably the least enjoyable Boucher serial. And honestly, part of it might have been due to the fact that it was set on Earth and sort of didn't have that otherworldly, like, flair that the other Boucher serials had.
I mean, I still enjoyed it. I mean, I would agree it wasn't my favorite Chris Boucher serial, but I still think it was one of the better serials we've had from... You know, just in general. I think the plot was good and I think the characters were well developed. I think where it fell apart was just kind of in the dialogue.
Yeah, unlike the other Boucher stories, the backstory isn't exactly developed through the dialogue until episode 4 when the Doctor just decides to explain everything. Yeah, and that was part of why we liked the other Boucher stories, so... Yeah,
I mean, like I said, all the characters, though, had that trademark... I mean, I guess it's just trademark that every serial-specific character is developed and has, like, a motivation for what they're doing.
Yeah,
is what I'm trying to get at.
I suppose.
It just wasn't really made clear because the dialogue wasn't you know, perfect, so to speak. But I think it still stands better than most serials.
I guess. I would say Thea, more than anyone, is sort of just a plot device.
Okay, yeah, Thea's a plot device, but, like... You know, Max has his own thing going. Fendahl wants to examine the skull because he's like, this is kind of suspicious. And then Max, you know, is the one who found the skull. And Adam's just kind of, he's suspicious of Fendahl and Max, and he doesn't believe the skull is good. And then Mrs. Tyler, the crazy old lady down the road.
I guess, although I felt it was done a little bit worse maybe than Robots of Death and was more along the lines of Face of Evil. Mm-hmm. So it's not exactly an upward curve, which is maybe why I'm being more harsh on it. But Mrs. Tyler was awesome.
Yeah, I think we're just comparing it to the previous two Boucher serials, which were, you know, amazing because they were surrounded by serials that were just good. So, and I think this one's still good. I just don't think it didn't kind of cross that bar into being an amazing serial. But I wouldn't say it's a serial you should skip, I guess.
Yeah. Don't skip any serial. No, you should probably skip some serials.
Maybe you can skip the reconstructions, but maybe you probably shouldn't actually skip any serials after that.
That's debatable.
Yeah, it is. But yeah, Anthony Reid takes over as script editor pretty soon, I think. Not sure exactly what serial. I know Robert Holmes writes next week's serial.
And I think the next serial is his last one as script editor.
And then Anthony Reid takes over. I think the only reason why we're playing up the fact that Anthony Reid takes over this week rather than next week is because Anthony Reid actually passed away a week ago, so... Have you noticed that we seem to talk about serials a lot, like around either the anniversary of someone's death or near when they actually do die?
Well, it becomes relevant again for a split second, so of course we would.
No, I'm just saying we always mention these people and it always happens just around the time that they die.
Oh, God. Oh, God. Maybe we should stop doing this.
Trust your doctor is killing people. That's pretty dark. No, I just wanted to mention that because, you know, it's just kind of sad that we lost, I guess, a juggernaut of British television since he's script editor for at least a season, maybe 2. Season and a half. So he makes his mark, and I guess we'll see if he keeps that trademark info dump style in the future or not. And I guess we'll talk more about Robert Holmes next week since they'll be his final serial script editor. So, unless you have anything else to mention, I think that's the end of this episode.
Yep, I do believe it is.
So email us at thedoctor@decadentvegetable.com. Questions, comments, concerns, angry rants, love letters, comments about Chris Boucher. It's actually a really difficult phrase to say. Still kind of want to read one of his books. Check us out on YouTube at Trust Your Doctor. Check us out on iTunes at Trust Your Doctor. We released a little kind of 30-minute quote-unquote Thanksgiving special this week. We had originally recorded it because we thought we were going on hiatus in December, but some plans fell through, so the hiatus wasn't happening. So we kind of just have these extra backlog episodes recorded that we'll probably release around some holidays, just kind of as a bonus little thing for you guys. So
we discuss audio dramas, by the way, so if you
Yeah.
ever wanted to hear us discuss audio dramas, now's your chance.
yeah, we just find it a place last week, and we have another one recorded on a second Doctor drama, and that's about all I'll say about that. So should have checked that out.
Check us out on Facebook at Trust Your Doctor. Like us on Facebook. Also check us out on Twitter at TYD Podcast, and follow us on Twitter. And next week we watch The Sunmakers, which is, like we said, Robert Holmes' final serial as
As
script editor.
editor.
So until then, the end.